All right, welcome everybody to Week 5 Biscuits and SEC preview in the house. We're going to look back at Week 4 a little bit. We're going to look at what's going to be Separation Saturday in the SEC this week, and we're just going to go game by game and find out what's going on because I'm sure there's somebody out there that is desperate to know what's going to happen in Vandy, UConn. So just stick around for that. But before we get started, I do want to tell you can catch us on Twitter at the Stephen Willis and at Old Positively, on Facebook at facebook.com/Palmcast, and the Facebook group Positively Ole Miss. We're on Positively Ole Miss on YouTube. Subscribe, hit the bell. You'll not only know that we're streaming, you'll know what we're streaming about. And of course, we're on Twitch at Positively Ole Miss. All one word, all lowercase. Audio, you can catch us on Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, Pandora, Amazon Music, and Audible. I really like the Audible thing, by the way. But just as a reminder of where you can find your stuff. Boss Man, where can we find some Biscuits and SEC stuff?
Absolutely. So on Twitter, we're at Biscuits and SEC, and then that's the same thing on Instagram and on Facebook. So that's where most of our content goes. We're on that, all day Saturday during the games. And then you can also find us at biscuitsandsec.com. We post blogs up there. Got a bunch of different, fun content throughout the week going up there. And then we also run a Texas A&M blog as well, mostly that the Hammer runs. And that is called the Junction Blog. And you can find all that on social media at the Junction Blog, except for Instagram, which is just at Junction Blog. And you can find all our fun memes and content there.
All right. Well, we'll just, since you started talking about Texas A&M, we'll talk about Arkansas and Texas A&M. We were talking off air when we came into, if that second touchdown where they push him towards the end zone doesn't happen, I think A&M might win that game because by the end, Arkansas was completely out of gas. You guys just didn't seem to have a quarterback that could take advantage of that defense, even slightly a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll let Hank start on that.
Yeah, it was, I think if you're an A&M fan, obviously we are, and then you're trying to look at the bright side, it's a little bit hard to do in that game, especially the way the team played offensively. But like you said, at the end of the day, for as poorly as they looked, you lose by 10 points. The defense, outside of those two plays, played pretty well, kept Arkansas pretty well bottled up, and gave them a chance. The offense had nothing. And give credit to Arkansas's offense for making those plays, especially that first one to Treylon Burks. That was a great throw. KJ Jefferson took a hit right after he threw it, and they just beat man coverage on the outside and basically did exactly what A&M wanted them to do. That I'm sure was the game plan, was to make KJ beat him through the air. Made a great play. Second touchdown was just pitiful tackling, and again, Arkansas made a play. They took advantage. And then, like I said, A&M offensively just had nothing. So if Arkansas doesn't score that second touchdown, I could see potentially, A&M squeaking it out somehow, but it was a really, really bad performance offensively. Barry Odom had a great plan, and Calzada clearly – he just wasn't comfortable. He was not comfortable in the pocket. They were able to get pressure with 3-4 guys at the most. And even when he did have time, the zone coverage that they were running with 8 guys back in coverage, Calzada wasn't confident to pick it apart. Even if there was a little bit of a soft spot, he was either not comfortable making that throw, he wasn't seeing it, whatever the case was. So, yeah, just a tough game for A&M, really. But give credit to Arkansas. Sam Pittman in year 2, he's got them 4-0. They beat A&M. They beat Texas. They're rolling right now. So I'm excited to see what they do.
You left out Rice. They're 3-0 in the Southwest Conference.
You're right. You're right.
Southwest sweep.
Yeah. That's all I got really, though. It was a tough game. A&M didn't play well, but again, you take your hats off to Arkansas. They brought it from the jump. They were more intense to start the game. Seemed like they wanted it more. A&M, rallied and caught up with that. But you got to give the Razorbacks credit.
Yeah, Hank and I have talked about this one ad nauseum, and I think we could talk about this one for about 6 hours because there's a lot to talk about on both sides of the ball, A&M and Arkansas. When we talked about this game last week, I said that Arkansas was going to have a lot of emotion behind this game. They were sick of losing to Texas A&M, 9 years in a row. They were sick of that, and you saw that from the first snap, right? Kickoff, you saw Arkansas brought the juice. They were ready to go, and A&M just didn't look like they were ready. They really didn't. The defense was getting gashed early on. That's kind of been something that A&M needs to work on. Their defense in the first half gets hit in the mouth, and then they come back in the second half and look like a totally different team and shut it down. Elko, I think, is one of the best, in-game adjustment coordinators in the country, and you could expect at this point as A&M fans, we expect when they come out of halftime, that defense is going to shut it down. Nobody's going to score another point. Like remember the Titans, you're not going to gain another yard. That's Texas A&M's defense in the second half. But other than that, on the other side of the ball for A&M, there are so many issues that you can talk about. I don't think it's all on Calzada. I think Calzada, it's all kind of intertwined from the offensive line to Calzada to Jimbo calling plays. I think, again, Jimbo did not have a good game plan. He put it all on Calzada's shoulders. Calzada was on his heels from that 3-5-3 umbrella that they were running. Calzada wasn't on with his wide receivers. You did see when they would show that cam from behind Calzada that he did have receivers open at different points, coming out of breaks, coming on a cross or something like that, and he was just missing them. And then the wide receivers seemed like they couldn't catch a ball, right? And in some parts of the game, there were multiple drops where they weren't helping Calzada. Texas A&M only had 2 plays over 20 yards in this game. On offense, it's a mess. The defense is elite for Texas A&M. And then for Arkansas, they look great. I said in our preview that A&M was going to try and load the box and dare KJ Jefferson to beat him with his arm. He did exactly that. That 85-yard touchdown was a beautiful throw to Treylon Burks. And then the second touchdown, like we talked about, that was just poor tackling. I don't blame Aaron Hansford too much for that one. That was just one bad tackle, one bad play, but he's going to be a stalwart for A&M going forward. Arkansas is the real deal. They're legit.
Yeah, I think with that defense, the reason it affects people, and the first time you see it, it genuinely affects you. Ask Matt Corral last year about that. But I think what happens is the progression that a quarterback normally has based on the normal rules of football, they're tweaked to a point to where the third option is actually the first option. And we haven't really caught up with offensive football with what they're doing. But I think that's the next step.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, Calzada was obviously on his heels from it. They took away those intermediate routes, and then the fact that the run game couldn't get going because the offensive line couldn't block anybody. I think A&M was averaged 2.5 yards a carry in this game, and that was bolstered by a 67-yard touchdown run by Isaiah Spiller. So that tells you they were really averaging like 1.8 yards per carry. So Calzada didn't get any help in that department, and then the fact that Arkansas really didn't have to load the box. They were getting pressure with 3 down linemen against 5 offensive linemen for Texas A&M. They were able to just sit back and kind of blanket the wide receivers for A&M, and after that it was over. They had no shot because Calzada's green.
Yeah, should be pretty interesting to see. And other games from around the conference, Florida is a 38-14 victor over the Tennessee Volunteers. Florida, not much of a hangover. Hendon Hooker got hurt. If he wouldn't have gotten hurt, Tennessee would have covered in that game. But they had to bring in Joe Milton, and then the joke about Joe Milton is he can throw the ball 40 yards if you need him to. If you need him to throw it 30 yards, he can throw it 40 yards. And that happened again. And the game was basically over with that. But Florida kind of rounding into form ahead of Georgia.
They are. That's going to be a showdown. And we won't get ahead of ourselves because Georgia plays Arkansas this weekend. But sticking to Florida, they look good. That's exactly really what you want to do. Tennessee, not a terrible team, but you should beat them by about that score if you plan on competing in the SEC East and for the the SEC title, which based on what we've seen from Florida, they're right in the mix. Emory Jones looked a little better throwing the ball. Part of that's probably Tennessee's defense isn't that special. I know the Pittsburgh quarterback had a great day on them as well. But if you're a Florida fan, I mean that's something that is encouraging. I think he was 21 of 27 in the game, so much more accurate than he had been. And again, Anthony Richardson sat. It seemed like he was healthy and was going to get some time, but whether he wasn't actually healthy or whether Dan Mullen just decided, hey, we don't need him to win this game, so let's let him keep resting that. I don't know, but again, I think he's going to be a part of the offense moving forward whenever he is fully healthy. So whenever you get that element back and you get that dynamic playmaker to come in on certain situations or packages, this Florida team is dangerous. So that was a very good win for them. And, if you're a Tennessee fan, you might want to get used to games like that this year because I just don't think they have the guys on either side of the ball to really make noise.
Yeah, at the start of the year, I think everybody thought Florida was going to be good, but they really didn't think they could challenge Georgia in the East, and people weren't sure about Emory Jones. And through the first two games, people still weren't sure. And Anthony Richardson looked good. Emory Jones, I think, is rounded into form. He's looking good. He looked good against Tennessee. Tennessee just doesn't have the horses. I think I saw a stat. I think Florida is like 16-1 or something like that since 2005 against Tennessee. So really hard to call this a rivalry game anymore, which is sad because it is better for the conference when Tennessee is good and when that's a big game. But it's been a long time since it has been, and Tennessee still doesn't have the guys to compete with Florida on the field right now. They won't for a few years, I don't think. We can talk about Tennessee a little more they've got a game against Mizzou this week, which I think actually will be an interesting game. But as for Florida, they got dudes. They're good. Dan Mullen can coach. I've been on the Florida train, been saying it since the preseason, and I think they are going to be for sure the biggest challenge to Georgia in the East. If Georgia wants to get to Atlanta and then possibly to the national championship in the playoff, they got to go through Florida. Florida's the reigning SEC East champs. And so I think Florida's going to be there at the end and be there when they play Georgia, and that'll be the game that crowns the East champ.
All right, Kentucky, a 16-10 winner over South Carolina. I think the Kenny Trill thing that I kept making, the argument I kept making over and over and over again, I think Will Levis is our guy. I think he is our Kenny Trill of this year.
Yeah, I think you might have gotten it right. He has come down to earth and crashed down to earth since that first game against ULM. 16-10, you get a win, but it doesn't look pretty. South Carolina is not a good football team. And if you have any shot to compete with Florida or Georgia in the East this year, or you aspire to be that team maybe that can do that, you got to put some more points on the board, and you got to put some style points up against South Carolina. And they did not do that this weekend. It doesn't look good at Kentucky. I'm interested to see what it looks like going forward. But the road doesn't get any easier from here. And, I was not happy with what I saw with Kentucky. They got a lot to work on.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, Luke Doty was the better quarterback in that game. Levis, he just didn't have much. I don't know what the deal is. We'll see if he can find it. But I think, as we alluded to in previous weeks, if he doesn't have it, and it doesn't seem like he does, then they're just going to keep handing the ball off to Chris Rodriguez, who had another big day. So as long as he keeps running the ball well, Kentucky will be in games. But if they go up against a really a better team or a really good offense where they're going to have to put up points, it's going to be tough. It's going to be really tough because Levis, I mean, you throw for 102 yards against South Carolina, you're just not that good. Or you had a bad game, but he's put a couple of those together. So it's looking more like he's just not that good.
When they play Georgia, you're putting up 100-something yards in passing against South Carolina in the low hundreds. When Georgia plays you, you might put up 5.
Right.
Yeah, ask Vanderbilt. We'll get to that in just a second. LSU, a 28-25 victor. They were up by a couple of touchdowns. State kind of came back at the end and made it closer than it really was. LSU doesn't look that special. State doesn't look that special. This looks like a game for sixth in the West, honestly.
Yeah, I think, look, if you're an LSU fan, especially after how the season started, you're happy with the win. It's a road win in the SEC West. Don't take them for granted. But like you said, they still got issues. I mean, their offense right now is basically Keyshawn Boutte. They still don't have a run game. Their other receivers are just not consistent enough. So it is really right now on the shoulders of Max Johnson and Boutte. And that might be enough to beat Mississippi State, but when you play Arkansas, Ole Miss, Alabama, even A&M, that might be a 14-10 game with the way those offenses look. But they still have problems. So it was a good win. Again, just to kind of get their season going in the right direction, but there's still a lot of stuff they've got to work on. So, if I was an LSU fan, I would be cautiously optimistic because there's a lot more tough games coming down the road, and that kind of performance isn't going to be enough to win.
Yeah, I mean, watching this game, it's kind of interesting. I mean, they scored 28 points, right? LSU scored 28 points. One of those touchdowns was a Cole Taylor save. I mean, Cole Taylor ran, in front of that ball and then ran it in for a touchdown. And if Cole Taylor doesn't get in front of that ball, it's probably an interception. And it was a blown route. He wasn't even supposed to be there. So he catches that ball and runs it in, for a 50-yard touchdown or whatever it was. And you can take that one off the board, and it's an interception for Mississippi State, and Mississippi State might win this game. So, if you're LSU, you did. I don't know. I'm sorry. ESPN's on me again. They just decide to play videos. I tweeted about it, 2 weeks ago. I can't stand the websites that do that.
Yeah, I use Yahoo now for the scoreboard.
There you go. As you should. Yeah, ESPN is the worst. But anyway, yeah. So I mean, LSU. You take off that touchdown, and Mississippi State was right in this game. LSU gets a win, but at the same time, they've got difficult games coming up. They don't have a run game, like Hank said. And so, they got Auburn coming up this week. That'll be the first kind of test. Really, it looks like in the West right now, it's Alabama, Ole Miss, and Separation Saturday. We'll see what happens with that one this Saturday. And then you got Arkansas, and then it's just a mess. Who knows who the heck is any good right now behind those three in the West? I wouldn't be surprised if any of those teams finished in any order, behind those three. So LSU's got some problems. Mississippi State's just going to be a tough out all year. They're going to be scrappy for anybody they play. But, hey, win's a win. Coach O puts another one on the board. He gets revenge and lives to fight another week.
All right, and Vanderbilt lost to Georgia 62-0. I only bring that up because they had 4 first down and Georgia had 8 touchdowns. It's possibly the worst performance in a conference game of my lifetime, and it was a pure embarrassment for the Vanderbilt Commodores. There's no redeeming quality of that. But Georgia got a conference win, I guess, is the only positive that can come out of it.
Yeah, in some ways, I wish we did European-style soccer relegation because Vanderbilt would be in Series 3 right now. It wouldn't even be close to the SEC East. But it is what it is. Vanderbilt's in the conference. They have a long way to go, obviously. And Georgia covered the spread in the first quarter. So Georgia looks good. They got another – I wrote it in my preview on biscuitsandsec.com. This is another tuned-up game for Georgia. Let's just get a whole bunch of reps. Let's get JT Daniels some touchdowns. Let's get some, timing with receivers. Let's get the run game going. Let's tune up the defense and let's move on. And that's exactly what it was.
Yeah, whenever you see all the people that are saying kick Vandy out, kick Vandy out, kick Vandy out, Vandy is an information shield for the conference. Vandy is going nowhere. They will always be there. They are what is protecting the SEC from the Freedom of Information Act. They need their servers on a private school campus to where information can't be touched.
Yep. Yeah, that was you said it perfectly. Just an embarrassment.
Mm-hmm.
We knew that they weren't going to be able to compete, but that was so far from even coming close to competing that it was just bad. I mean, Clark Lee, God bless him. He's got quite a rebuild ahead of him, and games like that can just really cripple a program. We'll see what they can do this week against UConn because, frankly, they probably should beat UConn, even though they don't look like much.
I think they're two
But
touchdown favorites. How
yeah,
bad
we'll
is
see.
UConn?
That's a tough game to bounce back from that Georgia game. So we'll see. But yeah, UConn. I mean, I was looking at some of their scores, and they're I'm not even sure how they're in FBS football at the moment. They are more like a Division II team, not even FCS. FCS would be a uh, probably too much competition for UConn.
I think they're in line for literally the statistically worst FBS team in the history of FBS or Division 1A through that, and I think they're in line to do that. They're awful. They're next level awful.
Yes.
Let's move into this week. This weekend is Separation Saturday. Two major games. In Tuscaloosa, Alabama's a favorite by 14 and a half points against number 12 Ole Miss. It's a game that is the over-under is at 79.5. I think that under is basically stealing at this point. I see this game being somewhere around 35-31. But people see last year and they assume that it's going to happen again. But you're going to see a much more gun-shy defensively and less willing to take risks Nick Saban because of what happened to 600 yards. That has to be a shot to his ego, and the game plan will kind of reflect that, I believe.
Yeah, I think you're right. I was surprised to see that number so high. I mean, like you said, based on what happened last year, it's understandable. But if you've been watching really both of these teams this year, it like you said, it's probably going to be decided in the 30s because Alabama's offense is not nearly as potent. They're very good, but they're not at the level they were last year. And Ole Miss defensively is much improved. So that this will certainly be a high scoring game by typical game standards, but I think 79 is pretty high. This game, I'm just excited to see it because I think last year Lane showed kind of what he can do. Obviously, he knows that program inside and out in Tuscaloosa, so he knows how to attack them. He knows what bothers Saban and bothers his defenses. But not just that, he's now had a full year to implement his system. Obviously, Corral has looked lights out this year. He's been just way more consistent, obviously, and level of competition hasn't been super high, but he's clicking on all cylinders. So I'm just excited to see the wrinkles and the creativity that Lane rolls out there. And then, like you said, what does Saban do? Because he was watching that game film all off season because it was an embarrassment, and that's a shot to his ego to give up that many yards when he prides himself on his defense. So I expect Bama to be ready as well. Obviously both teams are going to be ready for this game. I would be shocked if it's a blowout, and I think Ole Miss is definitely going to cover. With the game being at Bryant-Denny, I'm going to lean towards Alabama, basically just on precedent. Not that I think they've looked better, but it's hard to go into Bryant-Denny and beat them. So I think you're looking at maybe a 38-35, 37-34 sort of battle that's going to be decided late in the fourth quarter, and honestly might even just come down to who has the ball last, right? Who gets their offense and their quarterback the ball with a chance to win the game and, goes down and makes a play. So it's going to be an awesome game. I can't wait. And I think Bama squeaks it out, but wouldn't be shocked either way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I cannot wait for this game. It's going to be an awesome one to watch. You know, we saw Alabama. I mean, I told you guys last week, Alabama is going to cover, and they covered. So Alabama, Nick Saban was on those guys. Alabama, you know, they look great on offense. Jameson Williams, right? The transfer from Ohio State, he got going 2 kickoff returns for a touchdown last week, plus an 80-plus yard, reception from Bryce Young. So, you know, I'm excited to see this game. I think Vegas knows what they're talking about. I think it's going to be close to 79, in my opinion. I think it's probably going to be, a 42-37 type game for whichever one comes out on top. Ole Miss, we know that they can score points. Alabama obviously can score points. Florida's defense, I think, is, better than Ole Miss's defense. Ole Miss has shown improvement on defense. Alabama has shown some improvement on defense, but I think both have holes, right? I think Lane Kiffin's kind of looking at the Alabama tape and seeing some things that he can exploit in this game. And I think, Nick Saban's looking at the same thing. Bryce Young just threw 5 TDs. He's looking like he's getting kind of in a groove and back on track after that Florida game. So I think this is going to be a great one. I think it's going to be a shootout. It's going to be back and forth, knockdown, drag out kind of game. I do think that being in Tuscaloosa helps Alabama a little bit, but I think I'm going to take Ole Miss. If you could see my notes, I've got like 7 things scribbled out because I was like, oh, I got Alabama, oh, I got Ole Miss, and I thought more about it. And now I think I got Ole Miss by 6 is kind of what I'm thinking. But either way, I cannot wait for this one. It's going to be a blast. And, this is why we love SEC football, is games like this.
I do another show called Talking Ball with Bill Flowers. He played back at in the early 2000s at Ole Miss, played wide receiver with Eli. And after the show, he almost got onto me for not calling my shot in the Ole Miss Alabama game. And because we're sitting there talking about all this stuff, it's a very, we both are obviously thinking Ole Miss has a good chance to win this game. But I'm like, yeah, I remember what 2002 looked like, and I remember what 99 looked like, and these are games that we were supposed to go into Alabama and win, and you end up getting beat like 41-3. So you're nervous to make those picks. But it was pretty interesting. But he spent like 20 minutes after the show just really kind of reaming me out for not calling my shot, like Chris Doering, like he said. So it was pretty great. One thing that I'm interested about is every quarterback, the first time they see this drop 8, because this is the same thing that Arkansas runs, it gives them problems as a quarterback. This will be Bryce Young's first look at the drop 8. And if he can handle it, good for him. I mean, they've got 4 and 5 stars everywhere, so the best athletes in the conference. If they decided they wanted to run the Paul Johnson triple option tomorrow, they'd be a top 5 offense in the country because they have that type of athlete. But it's going to be interesting to see, but I think it could give them problems, especially early on. Maybe a 3 and out for 2, and if Ole Miss can stack those into points to where they're front running a little bit on Alabama, it could be an really interesting game.
Definitely, and it would put Bryce Young in an interesting position, right? If Ole Miss can get ahead early, you've got a young quarterback who has not had to play from behind yet, as well as, facing a defense that he hasn't really seen yet. So it could get really interesting, especially if, like you said, Ole Miss can get out ahead early.
And let's look at Arkansas and Georgia. Let's see, what is that? Georgia's number 2, Arkansas is number 8. This is going to be a game. Arkansas is a front runner. That's what they are. If they ever fall behind, I think they're going to be in trouble. They're not built to come back. In this type of game, you almost have to empty the bag of tricks in the first quarter to try and get some kind of a lead. Again, basically the same formula they used against A&M. And work it to try and get a little lead and use that defense as a weapon. It ends up being like a 17-10 game, 13-10 game, something like that.
Yeah, I think this is going to be an interesting one as well. I think that Arkansas with A&M came up against it. Arkansas has a lot of experience, right? I think they've got 11 of those 6th-year seniors, the super seniors they call them, from the COVID year. So that experience is obviously helping Arkansas. I think it's what's keeping them in games and kind of gives them an edge against a lot of teams. And I think you're right. They got to get out and get ahead early if they have any chance in this game. Georgia has looked like the best team in the country for most of the year so far. And the other part of that too is Georgia has two big time guys coming back. I believe I was listening to some shows earlier, and Tyke Smith, I think they're saying should be back, and they're also saying Darnell Washington should be back. So this Georgia offense has gotten on track. They've looked high powered the last 2 to 3 weeks. And I think having Darnell Washington back on offense is going to be huge. And then the Georgia defense has been lights out, and you're only going to add a cornerback who I believe was an all Big 12 kid at West Virginia. So that if you're Arkansas looking at that, it's kind of like, yeah, we believe, and we got Sam Pittman, but I'm sorry, you're not going to beat Georgia, especially going to Georgia and between the hedges. So I got Georgia in this one. I think it's going to be probably by 10-13 or so, and I think Georgia pulls away late. I think Arkansas has the fight. They believe in Sam Pittman. They believe in what they're doing. I think they've got a great coaching staff with Pryles and Odom. And so I think they'll have a good scheme going into this one to attack Georgia. But I think at the end, Georgia's just got too much. They're just a better team. Like Shane Bieber said, they got 105 stars all over the field on defense. And so I don't think that A&M has a really good defense too. It's Georgia and A&M as far as total defense in the country right now. So Arkansas has seen it, but I think Georgia's even another level as far as defense than A&M is, and I think that's the difference.
Yeah, Georgia's defense is really designed to stop an Arkansas type offense. It's more of a shutdown against a running attack. That'll be interesting. Also in that game, KJ and Burks missed time because of injury during the A&M game. So I need to know if they're healthy going into Georgia, or if this is going to be a nagging thing to where Georgia, they're a little bit banged up. Then against Ole Miss, they're a little bit banged up. If I knew the answer to that, that would be determining between me picking Georgia to win by 10 and Georgia to cover fairly easily.
Yeah, I agree. I think, like you said, I mean, those KJ and Traylon Burks are two of the biggest keys for Arkansas's offense. Now, the Traylon Smith, the running back, is solid as well, but it's going to be hard to run the ball in a traditional sense against Georgia. No one's done it yet. They might be able to get some success with KJ just because he adds a different element. But if he's hobbled in any way and is not a threat to use his legs, I think they'll really struggle to run the ball. And then obviously in a game like this, you're going to need a threat on the outside. So Burks has got to be healthy, and they've got to be able to use him and get him the ball like they did against A&M. So it'll be interesting to see. I heard, from Sam Pittman, I think on his press conference Monday that he said they're healthy and they're practicing. If we know anything about college coaches and injuries, they're never telling the truth. So who knows? But I kind of agree. I think Arkansas will keep this close. They're very good. They're very well coached. They will be prepared. Defensively, I think they can give Georgia some fits. JT Daniels has looked very good. I don't want to say he hasn't looked good, but he's been banged up a little bit. And even in the games where he's been healthy, they've blown everybody out. And so he's really not played a full, knockdown, drag out kind of game where he's in there all 4 quarters and really needs to make plays. So it'll be interesting to see how he looks against this defense that does give quarterbacks problems. So I think the Georgia run game will be key here because if they can run the ball and open things up a little bit, get some space out there on the field, because if you can't run on Arkansas, we just saw it. They sort of just cloud the whole field with their zone coverage, and it's hard to pick it apart. So if Georgia can run the ball, which I think they'll be able to run the ball decently well, definitely better than A&M was, that should open some lanes up in the passing game. And even though Arkansas was able to score on A&M and their offense has looked very good, Browse will have a good game plan. No matter how good your game plan is, at the end of the day, it comes down to blocking and getting separation on offense. And Georgia's not letting anybody block them. They're not letting anybody get open. So I just think it's going to be hard for them to really score enough to win. So I think Georgia probably wins by 10, maybe 14. and it's probably a 28-14 or 24-14 something, because it's gonna be hard for Arkansas to get in the end zone. So it should be a good game though. Like I said, they'll be prepared, and I think it's definitely not going to be some sort of blowout where Georgia just steamrolls them. But at the end of the day, you got to look at the talent and where what these guys can do, and Georgia just has too much of it right now to lose a game like this.
Yeah, and if you look at Arkansas's defense doing that 3-5-3 defense, the one weakness that it has is four verticals. You can outnumber them on the back end, but you have to be willing to call that four verticals play over and over and over again, because you'll eventually hit it, just because there's a numerical advantage of four receivers and three safeties, and there's going to be an uncovered guy.
Yep, and JT can hit that as well. So if they're willing to throw it and they can protect, which again I think they can protect pretty well, he'll let it loose for sure.
Hey, don't forget too that hopefully JT Daniels is in the game the whole time. We got no injuries and all that, but Tombstone Bennett beat Arkansas last year. So if Tombstone Bennett ends up getting in the game, watch out. He's going to put another headstone in there, and it's going to have Arkansas's name on it again.
Nice. Stetson Bennett the third. Oh.
Yep.
All right, let's go game by game real quick after we hit Separation Saturday a bit. Tennessee is in Columbia, Missouri. Mizzou is a 3-point favorite, SEC Network game, and it is an 11 a.m. game. It's a game that one day I'll be all about Missouri winning. The next day I will say, hey, this is a game Tennessee can get. And then I'll flip it back, go back and forth, because I can basically see both sides. The one thing I know for sure is if Joe Milton runs out there, I'm taking Missouri.
100%. I thought Mizzou was going to go in and beat Boston College fairly easily last week. That obviously
I told y'all.
Yeah, that obviously was not the case. So I'm kind of losing faith in Mizzou. But like you said, if it's Joe Milton, then I just have no faith in Tennessee. So, this should be a good competitive game. Connor Bazelak last week looked the worst he has all season. So, maybe him going home and he can get back into a rhythm. But I think he pretty much nailed it, Stephen. I think if Hendon Hooker is playing, I could see Tennessee going and getting a win, a much-needed win. But if he's not in there, then I think Missouri does pull it out. But either way, it should be a very competitive game. And we'll probably see something from Tennessee we've seen all year, where I bet you they can get out to a pretty good start, and maybe score some points early. And then it's just a matter of, can they defense, can it hold up? Missouri didn't have a ton of weapons, so it probably can. And then just they're just going to have to score a little bit after the first quarter and a half. Tennessee, that is. So again, hard to make a steadfast prediction with the quarterback position in jeopardy, but I'll go ahead and pick Tennessee to get a win on the road.
Yeah, I think I'm taking Tennessee too, especially if Hendon Hooker starts, if he's healthy. If it's Joe Milton, toss up. But if Hendon Hooker is healthy and he trots out there for the Vols, I think it's Tennessee. And even if it is Joe Milton, I think that there's still a good chance Tennessee wins this game. Mizzou did not look good against Boston College, and the defense has a lot of problems. I think Heupel is watching this tape of what Mizzou did against Boston College, and I think he's licking his chops. Right now, Tennessee, I was looking it up, they're averaging, I think it's just over 200 yards a game rushing. Mizzou gave up 275 to Boston College. And Boston College, it seems like, has two pretty good running backs, but so does Tennessee. Tennessee has two really solid running backs, and they've got the run threat at quarterback. Whether it's Joe Milton or Hendon Hooker, both those guys can use their legs. So I think that Tennessee is going to be able to gash Mizzou on the ground. I like Bazelak. I think he's a good quarterback. I think he's a steady presence under center for Mizzou. But I picked Mizzou third in the East in my preview, to start the season. We'll throw that out the window because I don't think Mizzou's that good, to be honest with you. I don't think Tennessee's that good either, but I think at this point, I think Tennessee just has a little bit more in the tank. I think they've got more on offense, and I think that their strengths play well against that Missouri defense. And I think that run game is the difference in the game. And I think it's probably Tennessee by 7 to 10.
Yeah, they really miss Larry Roundtree and Jalen Knox from that Mizzou attack. Let's go down to Columbia, South Carolina. The Friends and Family broadcast at 3:30 Eastern on the SEC Network. South Carolina and Troy. It's a game. I expect Troy to come out and battle. It's a game that they could probably get if Troy's scrappy enough. I think South Carolina, Will Muschamp recruited well defensively. Now, offensively, there's no dudes there. But defensively, they're going to keep you in and probably prevent you from some kind of a scary jump that Troy can jump on. Luke Doty has looked okay. It's a game I expect South Carolina to win. I think it's going to be ugly, much like many South Carolina games.
Yeah, I think this will probably play out pretty similar to the East Carolina game. Um, Troy has been up and down all year. They played Liberty very close. I think they're 2-2 right now. So they played Liberty close, but then they went last week and lost to Louisiana Monroe, who is not good. So Troy's one of those group of five teams that, like you said, every once in a while they can jump up and bite you. I don't think that's really the team they have this year. So I think with the game being in Williams-Brice, South Carolina should be able to pull it out. And again, it'd probably be a lot like that East Carolina game where it's probably be pretty low scoring. South Carolina might need maybe not a pick six like they had in that game, but something on defense, get some turnovers, get their offense a short field to work with that they can take advantage of. But I'd be surprised if South Carolina lost. So I think they'll pull it out, maybe 21-14, 21-17, something like that. Be close to the end, but they'll get the win.
Yeah, I mean, look, 2021 has been the year of chaos. I saw a stat that the most top 25 teams have lost in the poll era in any season through 4 weeks. So this has been a total chaos year. You saw Georgia State last week take Auburn to the wire. I don't know.
Should have beat Auburn.
They should have beat them. They had, except for TJ Finley, right, in a call that bounces Auburn's way. I guess there's still a little bit of Gus Malzahn magic left over, right?
Yeah, he forgot the horseshoe.
Yeah. So I think this is a year of chaos. That being said, I don't see Troy getting it done this week. But what I am saying is that I think they're going to keep it close. South Carolina didn't look real great against ECU. They haven't looked that good all year. Troy has a scalp on their wall fairly recently. I believe they got Ed O at LSU early in his tenure, or maybe it was Alabama at some point. But Troy has a big SEC scalp fairly recently, so they can do it. And even though they're 2-2, I mean Georgia State I believe was 1-1 or 1-2. They had a loss on their record too, going into the Auburn game last week. So. I don't count out Troy. I don't think South Carolina is very good this year, and I think it's going to be a close game. But I think in the end, you got Luke Doty back. You got a weapon or two. You got Kevin Harris for South Carolina. So I think South Carolina just has a little bit more. I think they probably win this game by 7 and pull away late.
Yeah. Florida at Kentucky, 6 o'clock Eastern game. That's 5 Central on ESPN, I believe. Yes. Florida's an 8.5-point favorite. I expect a relatively low-scoring game, especially on the Kentucky side. I expect Florida easily to cover this game. They're a good team, and Kentucky has been they're like the Oklahoma of the SEC.
Yeah, I think it kind of makes me wonder how Kentucky beat Florida a few years ago with Terry Wilson at quarterback. I don't understand how that happened. But right now they've got a kid who seems like he might be another Terry Wilson who may not be able to really throw the ball. And I think Florida is better than that team that lost to Kentucky a few years ago. I think they're a really good team this year. Emory Jones, like we talked about at the outset, I think he's coming into his own. I think, he's starting to figure things out at Florida. I think the offense looks good. That Florida defense is solid as well. Kentucky just doesn't have it going on offense right now, and Florida's got the guys to make you to dare you to throw the ball and take away Chris Rodriguez. Chris Rodriguez is still going to have a good game. I'd expect him to get 90 to 110 yards or so, but it's not going to be enough. I think this one's probably looks similar to what the Tennessee score looked like last week. I think you got Florida easily covering in this one, and I think it's Florida probably like 35 to 14.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yep, totally agree. Won't take up too much time. I think Kentucky's really only chance is just it's going to be a home game, so they'll be hyped up if they can get some turnovers early or maybe make a play on special teams, and sort of get some easy points in there. They could have a chance, but Florida's defense is too good to give up a lot to Will Levis in that offense. Their defense didn't let Alabama really run the ball on them, so although Kentucky does have a good running game, I wouldn't say that it's better than what Alabama's capable of. So I just don't think Kentucky's going to have enough, and I think Florida will be able to run the ball and kind of, again, just do something similar to what they did to Alabama. Maybe Emory Jones will be a little bit less sharp if he's on the road and it's a loud environment. And if that's the case, then they just lean on the run game, and he may look sharp either way. But yeah, I think Florida will pull away and cover that spread by the end for sure. Yeah, one thing I was going to say on going back to that Tennessee matchup, uh, if Joe Milton is going to be the starter for whatever reason and Hendon Hooker's out, if I'm Josh Heupel, and I don't think he'll do this because he's an offensive guy, but I would watch the Arkansas tape and I would tell Joe Milton, do exactly what KJ Jefferson's doing. We're going to throw the ball maybe 15, 20 times, and otherwise you just run. Because Milton, for whatever reason, seems scared to run. Um, but I think that would give him a chance if they tried to pull something like that.
Yes, my battery went out on my earpiece, so that's the reason I had to get up and change. It's like, hey,
That
I'm going to
happened to
get
me
up and walk.
earlier.
Yeah.
That's why I was fiddling around. My battery on my laptop is about to go out. Technology.
So let's talk about a little bit of Mississippi State, Texas A&M. The SEC Saturday night game. A&M is a 7-point favorite, 7 p.m. Eastern. Jordan Rogers, Tom Hart, and the guys in town on the SEC network. It's a game that I think it has like 21 to 14, 24 to 17 written all over it. It has a chance to be a very defensive game, but I don't think it will quite go there.
Yeah, I think A&M will win, but I would not pick them to cover. I do not think this offense, from what I have seen, has enough to pull away from anybody. Mississippi State's defense is solid. Um, like you said, this should be a defensive game. I just don't think Mississippi State's going to have enough offensively to get A&M. A&M should be able to run the ball a little bit better than they did against Arkansas. I don't think they'll be able to run it well, but they ought to be able to get, as a team, 100 to 150 yards, and just open things up a little bit, just enough to pull it out. But I do think, defensively, this is a good matchup for A&M, despite how well they have looked overall. Their one Achilles heel on defense has been the run game, and Mississippi State just doesn't really run it. I get they ran it on LSU out of nowhere, but the odds of Mike Leach running the ball that much in 2 consecutive weeks, I think, are pretty slim. So I'm guessing we're going to see Will Rogers throwing a bunch, and I think the A&M secondary can hang with Mississippi State's skill positions. So I'm right in there with you, Steven. I think you're looking at a 24-17, 20-13, 20-14 type of game that's close throughout, but just there's not enough firepower from Mississippi State to pull it out. There's no Traylon Burks or on Mississippi State right now, so. Thankfully for A&M, they should be able to get a win.
Yeah, this one last year, if I'm remembering right, I think it was 28 to 14, and A&M scored a late touchdown, and I think Mississippi State did as well. On Texas A&M right now, they don't have Kellen Mond. They don't have a quarterback who's steady, who can get them through adverse times. They've got Zach Calzada, who kind of looks like a deer in the headlights back there right now. Uh, it seems like each week, right, for A&M, we've been saying, "Oh, this is the week, right? Jimbo's going to scheme it up. He's got it figured out with Calzada," and we've been disappointed from Colorado to Arkansas, and then now we'll see what they've got against Mississippi State. I think because they don't have a quarterback like Kellen Mond, I think the Aggies do win this one, but I think it's closer. I think it's probably something like a 21-17 type game. I think it's four or 5 point win for A&M. But Mississippi State has a good defense. Mississippi State can play, and Aggies all know that Mike Leach coming to Kyle Field scares the living daylights out of you because of what he did against us when he was at Texas Tech back in the Big 12. So you don't ever overlook this game if you're an Aggie, knowing Mike Leach is coming to town. But I think that the A&M defense held him to 14 last year. Will Rogers is looking a little bit better this year, and I expect him to be throwing the ball all over the yard, on Saturday. But I just don't think it's going to be enough for Texas A&M. I think Texas A&M is just going to have too much on defense for Mississippi State to overcome. And Arkansas has a better offense, in my opinion, than Mississippi State does, even though they run, obviously very different systems. They just have more players, like Hank said, Traylon Burks, and those guys, Traylon Smith for Arkansas, KJ Jefferson now, looking great. So at the end of the day, A&M's defense is the difference. I think this is the week that Jimbo does figure it out, and Calzada does just enough to get a win for A&M, but it probably won't be pretty.
Yeah, probably not. Auburn goes down to Tiger Stadium to take on the Bayou Bengals at 8 o'clock Central at night. Let's just say things are going to be lubricated. And I expect the absolute best shot to be given to Auburn, which is going to come into this game in a very scary situation after realizing what almost happened last week.
Yeah, I'm interested to see who starts first of all at quarterback. I think I saw Harsin come out and say that Bo Nix is still the guy. But I don't know. It'd be hard to start him after last week and what TJ Finley was able to do. I mean, he won the game for him. I think LSU will win this game. Like you said, it's a night game at Tiger Stadium. Auburn hadn't won in Tiger Stadium, I think, since like the early 2000s.
Cigar game.
What's it? Yeah, right.
99.
Yeah. So it's been a long time. And I just don't think Auburn is in a good place right now. They competed well against Penn State, but this is a different beast going into Tiger Stadium, and just based on what they did last week, I mean that was a total dud. They fired their wide receiver coach. There's a lot going on right now that just doesn't scream that we're going to come out and execute super well. So I think LSU will win this game. Auburn right now, I mean, if I was them, I would just try to basically do what UCLA did and hope you can bully them in the run game with Tank. And even Bo Nix, if he's going to start, I would run him more just because he's not going to beat him through the air. So you got to try something. But at the end of the day, I think LSU is the better team right now. But it could be close. I mean, I think LSU will probably win by 7 to 10 points. Just again because it's at home, it's a night game. They're going to be ready. And again, it's really a game that Coach O and LSU cannot afford to lose with what they have coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think LSU. I got LSU in this one. I think it's a night game in Death Valley. I think that's kind of all you need to say. And then when you couple that with the fact that Auburn is frankly just a mess right now, I think that Penn State game and that performance against Penn State in Happy Valley was a bit of fool's gold and gave a little bit of false hope to Auburn fans because then they came out and laid an egg against Georgia State. And it is going to be interesting. I was listening to the J Boy show earlier, and I know we all listen to that crew. They're great, do great work. So they were talking about who does trot out for Auburn at quarterback, and J Boy made an interesting point. He came at it from a different angle, I thought, and that was that Auburn actually may start Bo Nix instead of Finley because Bo Nix has played in these type of games before, but also that if Finley was the starter walking out in his first start for Auburn, and it would be in Death Valley at LSU, where he transferred from, that the hype around that and the pressure, right, and kind of the the excitement on Finley's side might be a little bit too high. Whereas if Bo Nix struggles and Finley has to come in series 2 or 3, maybe Finley has settled down by that point and can actually just play the game. So it'll be interesting to watch what happens. Does Finley trot out to start? Does Bo Nix trot out to start? Do we see Finley within 1 or 2 series? What happens there? But at the end of the day, I think that Auburn's just a mess right now. I don't think that they're a very good football team. It's night game in Death Valley. And then you've also got LSU, who's riding a 3-game win streak and feeling pretty confident. Max Johnson's looking better. They still don't have a run game, but Auburn just doesn't have enough, in my opinion, to overtake LSU in this one, again, in a night game in Death Valley. Just not going to happen.
Yeah. And we're not going to talk about Vanderbilt and UConn because there's nothing to say. Just win the game, Vanderbilt, and we'll start talking about you again. If you lose that game, we might not talk about you again the remainder of the season.
No, you'll have to earn it if you lose to UConn. That's
yeah,
for sure.
Seriously. And I don't even know how they would earn it. But they've lost to ETSU, so who knows? But for Bossman Slim and the Hammer, thank you for tuning in. This has been Biscuits and SEC's Week 5 preview. We do this every Friday at 6 o'clock. Next week they'll come in and talk a little more about sports and everything about that. So for them, I'm Stephen Willis. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you next time.